Good evening, everyone. You're all very welcome to the university tonight. My name is Rebecca Doolin. I'm the Vice President of External Affairs here at Maynooth University. I'm thrilled to have you all here in person in the Maynooth University Library tonight for a very special lecture. And to all of the alumni and friends joining us online, I think there were about 90 people registered online, so I think you're probably still popping in, but we're really delighted that you could join us and be with us here tonight for this really special lecture from Professor Richard Roche and Dr. Linzi Ryan right behind me here, How Memories Make Us. It's a talk exploring how memories form a fundamental part of who we are, how they are formed, and what we can do to preserve them, something I know we're all really, really keen to learn more about and think about tonight. As you know, this is a hybrid event being live streamed online, and I think to me, I just have to say this is one of those kind of COVID legacies that I'm happy to hold on to because it really does allow us to keep in touch with all of you around the world, wherever you are, and hopefully you'll get to feel like you're still part of us and learn a little bit tonight too. And to all of you, those in the room, alumni, but also members of the community, we're really, really happy to have you here tonight. I think I want to say some of you might be aware the university launched its next strategic plan here a couple of weeks ago, and a big part of that is about increasing and boosting our engagement, both with our graduates, but also in the beautiful community and the region we call home. So you're going to see a lot more of events and opportunities like this to come in and be engaged and part of us at the university. I just want to remind everybody to stay, and if you want to stay up to date on lots of events and ways you can engage, keep an eye on all the alumni social media channels and university channels for that. I also want to say thank you especially tonight to our special guests. In many ways, this event, I think, is long overdue. I've talked to both of them about it, I think, for years now, because we lost those couple of years in a way during COVID. And I have to say, I kept seeing Richard pop up in all of my social media feeds for various events. He's been doing it festivals here and there, so it's long overdue that we have him here to talk to our alumni and our graduates and reconnect and share his learnings with us, and to do it with Linzi here from a different perspective and joining in and hopefully having a little fun along the way. So really thrilled, and thank you both for being here and giving us your time tonight. Before I hand it over to my colleague, Professor Ronan Farrell, I just wanted to say after the event, we'll have time for some Q&A at the end, and then we'll head downstairs for a little reception. I'm sorry for those of you online who won't get to have a beverage or a snack with us tonight, but you'll just have to come in person next time, and we hope you can do that. So at this point, I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Professor Ronan Farrell, the Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and I would just like to say to those here and online, you're all very welcome to this joint event between the Alumni Office and the Faculty of Science and Engineering. Just to say, this is the first event of our Science Week activities, and kind of just this year, the Science Week is all about kind of how to be human in today's world and how the decisions we make today will impact the people and the world of the future. And memories are very much part of kind of how we impact on the world and the people around us. Just like to say, make a pitch, kind of if anyone is in the region. On Thursday, we're opening up the National Science Museum. There are guided tours, and there are also access to the Russell Library, which my daughter keeps saying is like Harry Potter. So books with chains. I'd also like to say on Friday we have Science Night, which is an open festival of experiences, primarily targeted at the younger audience, but you're all very welcome to attend. So on this basis, I would like to just formally introduce my two colleagues. The first is Professor Richard Roche. So Richard has been with Maynooth University for a number of years, and he is the deputy head of our Department of Psychology and making quite an impact there. And his research interests are in cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, particularly in the area of memory, aging, dementia, stroke, brain injury, and synesthesia, which I probably have said badly. But he's promised me that today we won't be just totally morbid and talking about the downsides. I'm also joined by Dr. Linzi Ryan, who is a professor in our Department of Design Innovation, where she teaches design thinking. And she is currently a product and service designer, which is how she describes herself in the public and private sector. And she is in particularly working in the dementia services in the northwest of the country. So on behalf of the faculty and behalf of the Alumni Office, I would like to welcome the two speakers and hand it over to them.
Thanks, Ronan. Thanks, everybody. It's lovely to be here to take part in Science Week with you all. I'm going to pace around a little bit. So I want to start by asking you all to participate a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of participation tonight, not too much. But I want you to start by, everyone just, if you can close your eyes for a minute. I want you all to try and recollect a particular event, a particular instance or an event of something that happened to you around about your late teenage years, maybe early 20s. Now, for some of you, for some of us, that's a longer time ago than for others. But from around that time period, just pick on a specific event and try to remember where it was, who was there, what the occasion was, what you could see, what you could hear, what you could smell or taste, how you felt at the time. Think about the person you were at that time. How you looked might look very different to how you look today. Again, for some of us, that's more true than for others. Think about being in that time and that place. Okay, so open your eyes. And I can see from some of the smiles around the room that those look like quite positive memories. And I want you to think for a second about the process that you just engaged in. How would you describe what you just did? What words would you use to try and define what you just engaged in? We often use words like I recalled, or I recollected, or I retrieved, or I brought something to mind. Now, those words that we use about memory are really interesting. And they kind of reveal something about maybe the way we picture or think about how memory works. Now, tonight, Linzi and I are going to talk to you about how memories make us. But before we do that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we make memories. And being a neuroscientist, that's one of the things I'm interested in. So I'll talk a little bit about how we create memories, first of all, and then that will let us discuss and discover how memories make us as we go through the talk. So think again about that terminology that we use. If we can't remember something, we often say things like, I can't quite recall, or I don't recollect, or it's on the tip of my tongue, I can't quite place it. So those types of phrases, they conjure an image or an idea of how we imagine memory might work. And we often picture memory almost being like a warehouse. We imagine it's like some big repository, some big store, where memories are like objects that are put there. And when we try to remember them, when we recollect or recall or retrieve memories, it feels like we're going to a place, finding this item, this memory, this crate, and then bringing it somewhere, bringing it into conscious awareness, bringing it to mind. That image of memories being in different locations and moving around, it's quite intuitive and it's simple and it seems to tally with our experience. But actually, it turns out that the way we create memories in the brain is quite different to that. And because of that, our memory is often prone to mistakes. It's less reliable than we might like to think it is. Now, I'm going to prove that in a minute, because I can tell you might be a little bit skeptical. Before I do, does anyone recognize that warehouse in that image? Anyone spot where it's from? It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones fans get that very quickly. So it's from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I'm going to stay with films for the next couple of examples. What I'm going to do is, in the next few slides, I'll show you a picture, which is a famous scene from a film. And when you see the image, there's a quote that's connected to that particular image. I'll count you in, and then I want you to say the quote if you can remember it. Okay? This is the only participation you'll have to do tonight, so please go along with it. And you can do it at home as well. Okay, so I'll show you the picture. I'll give you a minute to try and summon or recollect the quote, and then I'll count you in 3, 2, 1, and I'll get you to say the quote. Okay? Okay, are we ready? Okay. First one. Okay, so some of you will hopefully recognize that image. and that moment from The Empire Strikes Back. If you have the quote in mind, 3, 2, 1. Right, I've heard a lot of Luke, I am your father. Confident in that? Pretty confident? The quote is, no, I am your father. Now, that was close, but I can't give it to you. Okay. Okay, next one. Okay. From Forrest Gump, okay, famous quote associated with this image. Hi, come on in. Okay, if you've got it and you've remembered it, 3, 2, 1. My mama always said life is like a box of chocolates. Are we confident about that? You're very, you're very close. She said life was like a box of chocolates. It's a tiny, subtle difference, but again, our memories sometimes fill in blanks and play tricks on us. One more, and then we'll move on. This is from Silence of the Lambs. It's the first meeting of Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling. Anyone want to go 3, 2, 1? Hello, Clarice. Hello, Agent Starling. He just says, good morning. He doesn't know her name yet. But now, those are silly examples of how our memory can be quite fallible, even when we're very confident in what we think we remember. Okay? Now, these examples are all from a type of memory called semantic memory. And this is memory for general knowledge or facts about the world, the type of knowledge that's useful for table quizzes. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about a different type of memory, which is the memory for events that happen to you personally. And these are the memories of the events of your life. And they're called autobiographical memories. Now, just like semantic memories, it also turns out that autobiographical memories are also a bit fallible. They're prone to distortion or manipulation or decay. And I say manipulation because I intentionally manipulated you with this one because I mentioned Clarice Starling by name and a lot of you repeated it back to me. So even the way a question is posed can sometimes influence what we think we remember. So tonight we're going to talk about these autobiographical memories, and we're going to look at how they shape who we are as people. Now, what happens in the brain when we remember something, it's almost magical. Because when we re-experience or remember an event, all the areas in the brain that were active at the time of that event, areas for what we see, what we hear, what we feel, our emotions, our sensations, all those different brain areas that were active at the time, they become active again at the same time. And we internally relive that moment, that event. We relive it maybe decades later. So internally, we re-experience the event all over again. And in that moment, we're that young person again. We're that person in our late teens or early 20s, re-experiencing, feeling the feelings we felt back then. It's a remarkable process. And in a very real way, memory is time travel, effectively. We get ourselves transported back to another time and another place. And in lots of ways, we become another person for that brief moment. But there's a downside to this, because the fact that these different brain areas become activated again means that the memory can change. And it turns out that every time we remember an event, every time we have an autobiographical memory, it changes very, very subtly. There's a slight change each time we remember it. So memories are much more dynamic than objects in crates in a warehouse. They're more like living things. And the more we experience them, the more they change. So in that respect, I know it's tempting to think of the experience of memory as being a bit like watching a home movie in our heads, or watching a film or a video file. Because when we remember something, it can feel like it's projected onto a little screen inside our skull, and maybe a little person in there is watching it play out. And that's an accessible and it's an intuitive analogy for what memory is like. But it's not really like that. Like I've said, when we re-experience or remember something, that memory becomes active and it can be changed or manipulated, or it can decay or be lost. So in a sense, when we remember something, it's not really like watching a film, it's more like going to see a play on multiple occasions. Every time you play a film, it'll be identical to the last time you saw it. Every time you run a video file or watch something on Netflix, it's identical to the last time you played it. But every time you go and see a play, if you see it on multiple nights, the play is the same every night, but the performance will change subtly from night to night. There'll be subtle changes in the delivery. Someone might change one line or two in the play. The gist will be the same. The play is the same. The memory is the same, but it changes from performance to performance. So memory is more like a play than watching a film. Now, we've said autobiographical memories are the memories that make who we are and form the events of our life. But not all autobiographical memories are created equal. So there is a phenomenon in memory research called the reminiscence bump. And this means that memories from about the years of your late teens into the mid and even late 20s are remembered more vividly, they're stronger memories, and they're less prone to loss later in life. These memories are more robust, and we can retain them well into later life. Now, why would that be the case? So if you think about things that happen around about that period of your life, late teens, early 20s, some major things tend to happen. We leave home maybe for the first time, we go to college, we might start our first major job, we make friends that will last later into our lives for decades, we might meet our future spouse. These are major life events that shape a large portion of our identity and our personality. So it seems like these memories from the reminiscence bump are retained with greater strength and are less prone to being lost as we move later through life. And this is what we're talking about when we refer to these memories that make us. And I'd wager that, given the alumni present, a lot of those memories for you came from your time on campus here in Maynooth. So I'll hand over to Linzi.
Thank you. So whereas Richard spoke about how we make memories, how we can manipulate them over time, I want to focus on memory loss. So as we age, our bodies and our mind also change, and so do our physical and our mental abilities. And age-associated memory impairment is a natural part of growing old. We've all been in the situation where you walk into a room, go, I don't know why I'm here, I can't remember, or I can't remember where I parked the car or left the keys, or the password for a website. And that's a natural part of aging. But dementia is different, and that's where my own research focuses on. And dementia is when memory impairment begins to negatively impact on our daily life, where we start to have serious cognitive impairment that reduces our functionality. And it is incredibly common, and there's about 55 million people worldwide diagnosed with dementia, about 64,000 in Ireland alone. It's also notoriously difficult to diagnose as well, so they actually suspect that the people with dementia are significantly higher than that, we just haven't captured them. So it is something that we need to be aware of. Now, what do we mean? What are we talking about when we say what dementia is? And there's a fantastic analogy that we can use. So if we can imagine that in our minds is a bookcase, and everything that we have experienced, every memory that we have, our semantic and our autobiographical memories are stored in that bookcase. So as soon as you're born, you start to populate that bookcase from the bottom up. So your more older memories are at the bottom. So you would have your childhood memories on the bottom shelf. You might get to your teens around your knees, 20s and 30s at hip height, and so on and so forth. What dementia does is it's a storm that shakes that bookcase, and it causes it to rock back and forth. So the shelves at the upper end of the bookcase are disturbed more than the bottom. So the memories at your childhood and at your early teens and 20s are less likely to be disrupted by that shaking of dementia, whereas those ones further up the top are more likely to be taken out, to fall out. And so maybe you try to put some of those memories back, but those more recent memories are on the high shelves you can't quite reach. So those memories are gone, they're lost forever. Or maybe you take a memory and you try to put it back on the shelf, but you put it in the wrong place, it's out of order. So you get confused, you get disorientated. And this is what happens when you have dementia. Now, at the same time, there's a second bookcase in your mind. It's much sturdier than the one with your memories. It's the one with your emotions. It's the one with your feelings. And it's much more resistant to that shaking that dementia causes. So you're able to retain your emotions and your feelings much more statically, much more strongly than you are your memories. So whereas I mightn't be able to remember someone's name or my relation to them, I can remember that I love them, and I can remember that they make me feel safe. So using emotions to help people with dementia to feel comfortable is incredibly important. And we can use those emotional links to bring memories, positive memories, to the surface. So this is a lady. Oh, she started already. Can we pause this for a second? Sorry. So this is a lady called Martha. So Martha was an incredibly accomplished ballerina in her youth. And Martha's quite advanced dementia now, but we can see our senses are one of the biggest prompts that we can use to bring those feelings to the surface and bring those memories along with it. So things like touch, taste, smell, sight and sound are big catalysts to bring those memories right to the forefront of our minds. And we can see with just playing Tchaikovsky's Black Swan, that memory that it invokes within Martha. That video because you can see the pure joy on her face as that memory is brought to the surface for her. So now I want you to imagine you do have dementia. I want you to imagine that you wake up in a room you don't recognize, in a house you're not familiar with, surrounded by strangers. And when you tell them, I don't understand, who are you? They tell you, no, you're wrong. Everything is fine, you're the one that's out of place. And this isn't meant to scare you. What it's meant to do is to help you to empathize with someone who has dementia. You're going to feel confused and disorientated and scared. And it's really important for us when we are working with any services to do with memory that we understand the emotions that that person is going through and how we can use things like memory prompts and reminiscence to put them into a space where they feel comfortable, where they feel joy, where they're not as scared anymore. And The old model where we would place people into a care home was based on a 70s model of treat the disease, not treat the person. So they would be heavily sedated, the disease would be treated, but that emotional part, the essence of who that person was ignored. Now, thankfully, we are rapidly moving away from that model now, and there are some really innovative approaches that are being taken. For example, this is what's known as a dementia village, or a mind healthy village, or micro town, which treats dementia care very humanistically. And what it does is it has everything that a normal town would. It has theatres and hairdressers and cafes and pubs, can't forget a pub, that people with dementia can live in and live happily and seemingly normal lives. And their carers man the stores, they're their neighbours, they provide the care in a organic, humanistic, emotional way. Very, very different to that model of treat the disease and not treat the person. And that sounds like quite an elaborate type of service, and it's right. Not an awful lot of countries would have the budget for this type of thing, but we can take elements of that empathetic approach to care and use it instead. So here we see a bus stop, something really simple. That bus stop doesn't go anywhere. But people with dementia tend to gravitate towards places of transport. So they are looking at those autobiographical, those well-embedded memories of going to school, of going to work, of collecting the kids, or maybe they just don't recognize the area that they're in and they want to try and go home. So they naturally gravitate to train stations, bus stops, taxi ranks. So people have started in care facilities to place replica bus stops around the verges of the facility grounds. What that means is that if a person with dementia gets disorientated, begins to wander, they'll naturally gravitate towards that point of transport where they can be kept an eye on or can be gently brought back to the care facility. So it's a very simple way of leaning into one of those embedded memories, one of those well-established practices that they have, and using that to provide care that, again, makes them feel comfortable. And even something as simple as making a cup of tea. So I worked with dementia care services in the Northwest. There was a lady who loved a cup of tea and a biscuit in the evenings. That was her default, her comfort zone. And she caused a fire because she placed an electric kettle on a hob. And her children, who were her care providers, went into a little bit of panic. They wanted to try and keep her safe, said, oh God, we can't let her make tea anymore. We said, no, we need to take a step back. We need to look at her. What is her fond memory, her well-practiced memory? And what we did was we just gave her a stovetop whistle kettle. One that she had used since she was a child, one that was in that bottom shelf, in that bookcase of memories, and it enabled her to continue to have that nice cup of tea and a biscuit at the end of the day, something that was that simple but that was meaningful to her. And what is really positive to see as well is that, again, those old practices are becoming just that. They are old, they are outdated. And the EU Commission is now drastically placing pressure on countries to be proactive with dementia. As I said, the numbers are huge. Our population is getting older. We are living longer. So the number of people that are going to deal with a degree of dementia at some point is also increasing. So they have asked every government to come up with an action plan to provide suitable dementia care and the necessary funding to provide that care as well. But what is really interesting is that we are now progressing even beyond dementia care policies into something much more inclusive. So countries that would have been the forerunners with dementia policies, for example, Finland is one of the first to come up with a formal dementia policy on a national level, have now said, no, that doesn't work anymore. It's not suitable anymore. because that is exclusionary, not inclusionary. It is not enough to say we have to treat dementia. Minds and memories are the important thing across the board. So they have gotten rid of their dementia policy, and now they have a memory-friendly policy instead. And that teaches children from preschool all the way up to secondary school in a formal academic process of the importance of memory and how to retain it, how to manage it, like we would our bodies as we're getting older. And what's really interesting again is that we can see, well, it does, they've identified 3 different key benefits that new approach takes. One is that it makes us aware of the importance of memory and how to maintain it throughout our entire life. It's not something that we just begin to think of when we're older. 2, it's that it helps us to identify cognitive issues early on so that we can help the person, we can provide early intervention. And 3, it chips away at the stigma that's associated with cognitive impairment as well, because memory is important for everyone, regardless of what age they are. And that nicely segues my way back into Richard's work.
Thanks, Linzi. Yeah, in the research that my group carries out here in Maynooth, we try and adopt some aspects of that approach by working with the local community. Now, I mentioned earlier that memories, we can think of them as living things, and if we want to keep them and retain them, the best thing we can do is rehearse them and recall them regularly. And my research group work with groups in the local community. We've worked closely with a walking group for people with arthritis. And we use an intervention called reminiscence therapy. So in reminiscence therapy, we meet with older people in the community, some who have dementia, some who don't, in the local library on the main street, or sometimes in other locations. And for an hour or maybe up to 90 minutes, we guide them through structured reminiscence, where we ask them questions and probe them and push them to remember details from earlier epochs in their life, from childhood, from adolescence, from that time period of the reminiscence bump, from maybe middle adulthood. And we get them to do it in a group environment, in a very social atmosphere. And we find that over the course of several weeks of doing this, what we notice is that often recollections one person has will trigger memories for the next person, and it will sort of cascade, and more details will come back as people share their experiences of earlier life. And there's a lot of research to suggest that this leads to major benefits. And we see improvements on some aspects of cognition, like memory. We see improvements in things like mood, decreased anxiety, decreased depression, increased engagement with the community. And we also tried to take advantage of another phenomenon, which I'm sure we're all guilty of. If you imagine walking down the main street, and I know 90% of the people here will have gone, what was that shop before it was a vape shop? Or what did that pub used to be called? What was the name of McMahon's before it was McMahon's? Anyone? Caulfield's, yes. Top marks. We try and tap into that powerful association between place and memory. And to do that, one of our research projects involved designing memory walks through the town. We worked with colleagues in the geography department to design routes we could bring people on in groups to reminisce as they travel through the different parts of the town, with the routes designed to pass places that might trigger particular memories. So the hope is that you encounter something which brings you back to a childhood memory, where you remember something that happened there as a teenager or in your early 20s. And again, by using this approach, by having these memory walks and bringing people through the town, we often see benefits to memory, to cognition, to mood, and to that sense of community engagement. And we really feel that the group element of this work is a powerful driving factor in these improvements that we tend to see in recapturing these memories. So I want you to think back again now to that memory that you started with at the beginning, that memory from late teens, early adulthood. Think again about the person you were at that time, the emotions you felt, at that period. Hang on to that memory. And if you want to keep that memory alive, the best thing you can do is relive it, think of it often, reactivate it often, share it with someone else. Some of the details that you share might trigger memories for them. So I hope we've given you some insight into how we make memories and how memories make us feel and think and act and relive the past and travel through time, and how these memories make us us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going to take some questions and answers. So are there some microphones, I think, roaming around? Anyone have any questions? Don't be shy. It'll help your memory.
Yeah, got oh there. Yeah. Thanks very much for the talk. It was really, really interesting. I suppose I just have a question around memory recall and false memories, particularly around OCD and other kind of, I suppose, neurodivergent kind of conditions. Are they recalled or made up in the same way that a true memory is recalled, or are there marked differences between the two?
Right, that's a great question, and I can take that one if you're happy with that. False memories are fascinating. So what seems to happen is, I mentioned earlier that when we remember an event, we reactivate it, and the memory traces in our brain become active again. While those circuits and pathways in the brain are active, that leaves them open to distortion, or what most typically happens is new information that we've learned since the event can get incorporated into that memory. So it seems to be a byproduct of the fact that memories are a reactivation, that they're open to interference. Sometimes it can be intentional, and we know that eyewitness testimony is a very weak form of evidence in court cases, because simple things like how a question is posed can influence what people think they remember. And I'll go back to my Clarice Starling example earlier. The way I posed that probably led a few of you astray. So there's a lot of interesting phenomena around memory called consolidation and reconsolidation. And the idea that when the memory trace is active again, it can be changed or altered seems to be the basis of a lot of these false memories and where they seem to originate from. So it's a lovely topic, and it's a fascinating one, and I'll be happy to chat more about it later if you like. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So, can you explain what happens when you try to remember something in the moment and you can't, and say you go away and you relax and it comes back?
Will I do this one? Yeah. This happened to me last week. I can't remember what it was I was trying to remember, but I remember being stuck, and I got to that impasse where I couldn't remember it. And I did exactly what you said to do. You go away, do something else, and it finds its way to the surface eventually. What seems to happen is, they've done lots of research around this, this phenomenon, is it seems that when we reach that impasse and that blockage and we can't access that information, when we go away and do something else, that processing is still happening on the back burner, and connections are still being made and pathways are being reactivated, so that when we take our mind off it, we often find ourselves spontaneously presented with the solution. Could be to the memory question that we had, the thing we're trying to recall. It could be the solution to a puzzle that we're given. And they've shown this with people trying to solve complex problems. They give them a problem that they can't solve, distract them with something else, and then the solution presents itself. So it appears to be a phenomenon of how much processing the brain seems to do just below the level of our conscious awareness. The brain's doing an awful lot of things that we're not even aware of most of the time. Right now, our brain is keeping our heart beating, it's keeping us inhaling and exhaling, it's keeping us from falling off the chair. There's a lot of cognitive operations the brain does as well that we're not even conscious of until there's a problem. So, yeah, the brain's back burner is a very powerful tool And it seems to eat up these problems while we do something else.
You know the phenomenon that you're walking along, say, a seashore in the north of the county, and you're looking down at a pool of water, and immediately you're transported maybe 50 years into the past, where you were in a different place, but you were looking into a pool of water. So, you know, these memory, the triggers, I'm interested in what triggers memory, which I enjoy at this stage of my life.
Yeah. Will I do this one?
That's a phenomenon, I presume.
I feel like I'm hogging the questions,
No,
but
they're all directed in your speciality, so go for it.
I think the things that trigger memory like that are typically very specific sensory experiences. So a very specific visual image that almost echoes back to a previous one. Or did a song ever come on the radio and you're transported back to being a teenager? Or you get a particular smell, like the smell of Play-Doh, and you're a child again. Song and music seem to be very special for evoking memories, and we see from, say, your video, the evidence that in lots of cases, even in very advanced stages of dementia, music can bring the person back again. Smell is a very powerful one as well, and they can bring you back to really specific moments with a particular aroma. But visual stimuli as well, or a sound, or a song, or a voice can transport you back. So it seems to be that circuit that I talked about in the brain, where the visual areas become active again in tandem with the auditory ones and the olfactory ones and the emotion ones. Sometimes all it takes is one of those to start firing, to send a cascade of stimulation to the others. And when they all operate in tandem, then you're transported back and you travel back in time to that moment. It's one of the most beautiful things that memory does. And it is time travel in a very real way. So I love it. Yeah, I think it's great. Cool.
I have a question. I'm just wondering if the bombardment of information in this current climate, will that affect memory? People of a certain era had a much more peaceful life if they were to, say, maybe it was radio, a certain minimum TV, and then whatever way they listened to music. But now it's constant information being thrown at us. So will that, or does it,
Get you with
interfere with memory?
Sorry, Linzi. Jump in. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting phenomena that have happened due to technology. And even the simple thing of no one can remember a phone number anymore because they're all in our phones. We've outsourced memory to devices a lot. And then there's another phenomenon around our attention span and the fact that we're bombarded with all this information, as you say, often very rapid fire. So it seems like it's very difficult to pay full attention to any individual thing. And that can be, I suppose it can feel quite daunting and quite worrying. But I suppose the reassuring thing is how adaptable the brain is. And it's phenomenally plastic. And it can adapt to very extreme situations. And I'm sure we all have adapted a good bit, even in the last few years, to changes in technology and changes in how information is presented to us. But it does change the quality of it, I think. I think there's a qualitative difference in how we interact with information. And that's something that would be interesting to study. But in terms of capacity, I think we'll be okay. But the nature of it and the nature of the process, I think, will be subtly different compared to, generations before us.
Hi there. I'm interested in whether there is or there isn't a role for left and right side of the brain in memory. Do they both participate in the one thing? And then secondly the importance of daydreaming and memory. Is there an association between those two things?
Definitely yours.
Okay. Yeah, the first one about the different hemispheres of the brain. So it's a fascinating one. We hear a lot about left brain, right brain differences and people who are left-brained and people who are right-brained. And a lot of those messages are a little bit distorted sometimes in the media or a little bit confused. The case is both hemispheres of the brain are involved in different aspects of memory. There's evidence to suggest that, I'm reluctant to say the right and the left, because a lot of the work where people say the left brain is for language and the right brain is for spatial, all that work is based on right-handed people, and it's flipped in left-handers. So I'll say the dominant and non-dominant hemispheres instead. They seem to have specialized roles for encoding new information and recalling old information. But they work in tandem, and the two hemispheres are densely connected in the middle via the corpus callosum. So both hemispheres do seem to be involved, and in different ways it changes as we get older. So there is a shift in how the brain processes memory from when we're younger to when we're older, and there's a shift from the back area of the brain towards more frontal areas, the posterior-anterior shift, they call it, as we get older. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry, I forgot it.
Just is there an importance around daydreaming?
Oh, yeah. So this is a lovely topic, and a good friend of mine, actually, Paul Dockery in Trinity, does a lot of work around mind wandering and daydreaming. It seems to overlap a lot with creativity, but it does seem that it can seem like a flippant thing to do or almost a waste of time, but it seems that more and more research is suggesting that mind wandering and daydreaming are really important things for the brain to do, and they seem to foster things like creativity and making new connections and forming new ideas. And that will, again, inevitably play a role in memory, because a lot of this creativity is based on linking memories and facts from the past in new and novel ways. So daydreaming is a very worthwhile activity and a very healthy thing for your brain and a good thing for your memory to do. Thanks.
Hi. Recently, I came across a very fascinating, I suppose, phenomena of the counter memories. And I'm wondering, maybe in what way do we create them as a way of resisting, or are they connected with the memory paradox? And is there any way in our lives we can reshape them as as counter memories and to remember what actually was happening, kind of how we skewed our understanding of the situation in the past, in the kind of context, maybe historical or political context of oppression and so on.
Okay, so I'm not sure if when you say counter memories, do you mean personal ones or kind of societal memories?
I am thinking personal, more of memories, like creating ways of resisting towards the context that is there. But I don't know enough, so maybe they are also collective.
I think, and again, it's not an area I know a lot about, but I think this is probably something that therapists might have more experience of. I think in a way we probably all do this a little bit. I think we all have a way of looking back at experiences and events, and most of the time we'll find a way to put ourselves in a good light, whatever the reality might be of the way the situation actually happened. So there is definitely a filter that we pass memories through relative to our role and our contribution to the situation. I think that's something that in therapeutic situations people look at a lot, maybe dealing with difficult childhood memories, but I wouldn't have much exposure to it. I tend to stick to the lab, so sorry, I don't know enough about that. Okay.
Hello, thank you both very much. Could I ask Dr. Ryan about the metaphor relating to the shaky bookshelf and memories being like books that fall off and then are put back in the wrong place? Is that why sometimes people have, particularly I think as they get older, can sometimes have a very vivid memory of something but associate it with entirely the wrong period in their lives? Because I'm experiencing this at the moment with an elderly relative where he'll say, oh, that must have been 20 years ago, when actually it happened 50 years ago, or vice versa.
No. So the analogy is perfect, because if you think of it, you fill from left to right, one shelf to next, so there's always an order to it. And what happens when people get dementia is that that order gets completely jumbled up and they lose context. So they will experience a memory in a completely different situation. It's why they often maybe get exasperated. They want to go home, but they're actually thinking about their childhood home, where they're physically in a house that they've lived in for 50 years. But it does cause a complete distortion of the sequence of the memory and how they experience that memory as well. So it's really common for them to misunderstand or to misinterpret what point in time they're currently in. Thank you.
I sometimes think it's maybe like when you have a dream and you're in a place, but the place is in the wrong place. Like you're in a room that you know isn't in that house, but it's there. And imagine it must be something similar to that.
Yeah, and very disorientating, because the cues that they associate with that memory are completely gone as well. So they have no reference point if they're living in that moment of their childhood, but it's in a completely different time, completely different location. Incredibly disorientating for them.
Hiya. My question is also going to give Richard a bit of a break. But I really like the idea of the dementia town. But unfortunately, for a lot of older adults who have dementia, they also have physical impairments and things that may actually, they need to go to a nursing home for extra care. So is there a way to implement the idea of the town into a nursing home environment to keep the older adults safe whilst also allowing them to reminisce, etc.? So.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff going on at the moment where it's essentially like an enclosed town. So you have what you would have in a normal town, you have streets with shops and things like that, but it is in an enclosed building. So if they wander, or if like that they have physical disabilities that they find it difficult to get around, it's designed to accommodate that and to mimic a town as a standard. So it just means it's in a much more highly controlled environment, and they can make accommodations for people with those physical restrictions.
Is it happening already in Ireland? That's just my question.
Yeah, it's not happening in Ireland at the moment. This is more, to be brutally honest, we were slow to the party. So the Nordic countries like Finland and Norway were really progressive, and they are the ones that were the first to have dementia policies. They are the first ones to say it's exclusive, not inclusive. We need to go in a different direction. And they're the ones that are leading the way with things like dementia villages and that really proactive dementia service delivery. We're only, our dementia policy is actually relatively young, so we haven't quite caught up to the curve yet. So unfortunately it hasn't gotten to Ireland that I know of yet anyway.
Sorry, can I just ask, are those policies state driven or
they're at a governmental
privately driven?
State.
Yeah,
State
I
driven.
think that's the major question, that who's the force behind these changes. It's handed over to companies with the profit in mind. That probably will be much slower, if ever.
Yeah, so they are state-driven. So that is one of with the EU committee approach, they are driving it at a governmental level, that it's not just to have an action plan, but they actually have to commit the necessary funding to implement those actions as well. So it's not tokenistic, or it's not going the commercial road. Yeah.
I think there is a dementia unit in Peamount Hospital where it's not a fully fledged village or anything, but their unit there is designed in a big circle. It's like a big donut, so that it's easier for people not to get lost. They can find their way by just continuing to go, which is...
But I do think it's a really important point to say that it doesn't have to be something as intense as a dementia village. It is about doing those small little incremental changes that are meaningful to the person. So for example, I was in a dementia facility, and every person had essentially mimicked their house bedroom within the facility itself. So they woke up and they felt familiar. Even things, there was a small frame on the front of each person's door that had a a visual prompt. So it was something that was meaningful to them. One of them had a picture of their collie dog, for example, that they had when they were kids. So it was easily recognizable. They weren't looking to remember a number. So while the Dementia Village is excellent in what it's trying to do, we can take elements of it and integrate it into the existing services while we are improving what services we are providing in the long run.
Just to touch on it, we hear a lot about the dangers of AI and how it's going to take over the world and kill us all. But do you see any benefits of introducing AI in terms of managing dementia, whether it be so they can relive, even through virtual reality, their old homes, their own old schools, and and other examples like that? Do you think AI has a positive role to play in the management of dementia going forward, or do you think that it may introduce some more trouble than it's worth?
So this is the thing, we're all aging. We're all going to get old eventually. So eventually the generations that grew up with technology and grew up surrounded by AI, that's going to be their fundamental memories. So there is a role to play in it. It's an interesting one. I think if we can, like with something as simple as playing the song for Martha there, if we could do maybe something more immersive, there's an interesting space there. But I definitely think as people that grow up with technology get older and are used to that AI, there's definitely a role in that space.
I think that there's a broader thing around how technology in general can help with things like memory impairment or memory loss. One of the things I didn't mention is for our reminiscence groups, we record audio of all the conversations and the group discussions as a way of trying to archive and document and record the memories that people share with us. And we have a section of the Digital Repository of Ireland where these files, once we anonymize them, we post them up there so anyone can listen back to stories about growing up in Maynooth back in the previous century, or people growing up in different parts of Ireland who joined our groups later in life. We try to archive some of that content so that it won't be lost. And technology can be used in these ways to try and preserve memories and act as memory aids. People can listen back to the audio of their own group and help them to jog further memories. So, there are ways that we can use technology for our benefit to try and help preserve these memories in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And touching on just the constant recall of the same memories, is that just like exercise in that the more you do it, the better you get at it?
Yeah, you can think about it as mental exercise. It's not quite accurate, but you can think of the brain as being a bit like a muscle. And the classic phrase is about use it or lose it. If you don't activate certain pathways in the brain, they will atrophy and die off. So keeping memories active, activating them regularly, sharing them with people, it definitely is a way of preserving what we can remember and the details associated. And things like, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just a nice analogy is like writing on a pad of paper, and every time you write on it, it imprints on the sheet below it, so you take the top sheet off, you write over it again, so it might change as it's going through the different pages, but that imprint is retained, the essence of what that imprint is retained.
Yeah, and exposing yourself to triggers and cues, like reeling in the years, for example, that show is fantastic because the amount of information that comes back to you that you think you had forgotten when you're presented with prompts or music or video clips, the information is in there a lot of the time. The problem is accessing it. So presenting yourself with cues to reactivate those memories is a really good way to keep those memories alive for longer.
Well, on that note, I think we could keep picking your brains all night, and I think we've clearly made a few memories tonight. I think that one that's really going to stick with me, and I'll say it so that it sinks in more, is that video of Martha. Actually, it's really powerful, isn't it? And it makes you feel, and it makes you think of something. So I think all of us will take something away from that, and these are very personal, not only to us, but for all those in our lives that are thinking about these things and perhaps struggling with them. So I really want to thank a lot of people tonight. First, I'd love to thank Styles Events. I'd like to thank the Development and Alumni Relations Office, led by Niamh Fitzgerald here on my team, and also the Faculty of Science and Engineering and Hayley Neve Rinn, in particular. I want to thank Lorraine in the back, who's been from the External Relations Office, and at the library, of course, here hosting us tonight. It's been really, really wonderful. I want to thank all of you online for being here in the audience, but most of all, I'd like to thank Professor Richard Roche and Dr. Linzi Ryan for teaching us so much tonight and making some memories. Thank you. And now, all of you here in the room, you're welcome to come downstairs to what we call the Red Books area. Maybe not the most creative name, but you'll see why when you get down there and have some refreshments. Thank you very much and good evening.